Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoin could be headed. Now today we're back with Cardano, but before I get into Cardano, I want to quickly apologize for the lack of uploads this last month. I was in hospital for quite a while, and I'm still now recovering, but the main factor that I couldn't upload was just the workload that I was dealing with, unrelated to YouTube. Trying to juggle all three of those things was just impossible for me. But I'm much better now, and I've gotten on top of my work, so there shouldn't be much reason for me not to be uploading consistently again. So that's the plan anyway. Anyway, getting into Cardano, one thing I will say before we start the video is that before I vanished off the face of the earth, I was always emphasizing how likely it is that we would have a halving sell-off, whether that be afterwards, whether it be before, whether it be on the halving day. I was saying a month or two before or a month or two after, sort of a 4-month window before and after the halving, we'll most likely see some kind of a big sell-off. And a lot of people didn't agree with this, which is fine. They're allowed to not agree. And they said that last cycle this was because of COVID and that we're not going to see any kind of big sell-off again. COVID was a black swan. But the reason I was saying this is because every Bitcoin halving, Bitcoin has had a big sell-off. Whether it's just before, whether it's 1 or 2 months afterwards, whether it's slap bang on the halving, there has always been a big sell-off from Bitcoin and therefore by extension all other altcoins on the halving. And if we kind of take a look at what happened last cycle, at least for Cardano, from kind of top to bottom, it dropped 60%, a huge amount. And now we haven't dropped as much this cycle, but if we take a look, we basically went down 40%. More. And another thing that isn't unusual to see over the cycles is to have multiple big drops. We saw this in Bitcoin 1 year. I can't remember if it was 2016, but Bitcoin had 2 multiple big drops, but the drops were to lesser degrees than what Bitcoin had seen before. So maybe something like this could be playing out again. To be honest with you, I would be pretty comfortable saying this is one of the worst drops that we'll get for the remainder of this cycle before we get to the bull run highs. Now, nothing is up only. But I think if we are going to go into a bull run, if we're going to have alt seasons, and if we're going to see big price movements like this, which is an if this sort of coming year, this will be, if not the final, one of the final big sell-offs that we see. But again, you could compare what we've just seen now to last cycle, and they've played out very similarly in terms of the movements that we've seen. We can see, if we take Cardano here, the first time that it came down to this low, you can see it has a peak. It even kind of has a double top, very similar. Comes back down close to testing this low. Technically it tested it this time, but last time it just came close, and we can see it kind of came close this time as well. A little bit of a rally and then come back down to touch the low. A little bit of a rally, then come back down to touch the low. And then a strong 20-week rally. Here we had a strong 21-week rally, only to then, after this 20-week rally, to see a strong pullback. And here we've seen a strong pullback. Now, in no way does this mean that Cardano is going to continue to follow the pattern that it played out in last time. It just seems to be coincidental that it has played out extremely likely. Not coincidental, because there are things that are the same, and so Cardano reacts more or less the same over the long term. But, you know, again, past performance does not guarantee future returns. Important to remember that. So while so far this price more or less has played out to a T, in how Cardano has performed, it doesn't mean it will continue to do that. And there's big talk whether we'll see a big move like this. And if we do see a big move like this, if we're going to go off how long it took last time, because everything else seems to be pretty similar, we'd start seeing these moves in 12 weeks, which would put us about 3 months forward, sometime in August. And now this does make sense. The crypto space does lull usually over the summer. Not much happens usually to crypto over the summer. That's because a lot of people are usually, out enjoying themselves. They're not worrying too much about crypto. There's other things to do in the summer aside from crypto. So you often see a lot of, not money withdrawing, but a lot of money being interested in moving. They just kind of park it there for the summer, come back to it at the end. So it could be likely that we get these kind of summer lulls. Nothing happens for a few months. Like we saw here, Cardano basically did nothing within these 3 months. It went from a low of 8.5 cents to a high of 12.5 cents. And for an altcoin, that's not really much of a range within 3 months. And then we had these exceptional rallies up, which if we measure from we'll go from the low to the high, we got a 4,000% move Now, am I expecting Cardano to play out like this bull run? No, I am personally not. To be honest with you, if Cardano saw a 10x from here, I would be pretty happy. I think a lot of people get lost in the potential gains that they've seen altcoins do before, and therefore have an expectation that altcoins will perform this well again. But as we've seen countless of times, the older an altcoin is, the more established it becomes, the more liquidity it gains, the less volatile it becomes. And again, by extension, the less gains it can make. So while these assets may become safer, and I say that with the most aggressive air quotes on the planet, you're naturally trading off risk for reward. So as these assets become more established, more liquidity, they become safer, more people put their money into it because they've seen what it can do, and in turn this creates a contradiction where the altcoin can still perform well, but it can't continue to grow so rapidly as it did before. Again, it's like, an early expansion phase. And again, I'm not saying you can't make gains with Cardano. Again, I think you can make a lot of money with Cardano. It's just obviously not going to make you as much money as it did here, in my opinion. But of course, I could be wrong. So again, just a quick recap to say what happened after the halving last cycle, and considering how similarly we've played out in a lot of ways, you could argue there is an argument to be made whether we're here, whether this sell-off correlates to this one, or whether the sell-off correlates to this one. To be totally honest with you, I haven't completely decided. I would probably argue, I'd lean more towards this guy, probably. They are similar moves in terms of percentage. I mean, it's more here, but it's still, both are comparable. And there's reasons to think both. So it's totally up to you. It also depends on what the Fed decides to do with rates, I think. It looks like they're not going to be cutting for a long time. Not until sort of Q3 at least of this year. So that will very much affect the crypto markets. But again, that's another video. If we're moving on to the Bitcoin pair, we can see we've currently hit a low over here. If we zoom in, we've kind of had a little bounce off this new low this cycle, more or less. I mean, we haven't seen this since we started after the last halving. But if we try to find a similar price that we were at, last time during a similar time frame, we can see that these kind of sell-offs here line up pretty nicely. And if we compare what happened before, we can see Cardano has a strong move to the upside. We did have a strong move to the upside, a 100% move basically, or a 90% move. 1/3 of what we got last time, which was a 270% move. And then we also got a pullback from that low to the high. We got a pullback from that high to a new low of 70%. But what brought us down to that 70% low was this dead cat bounce that we saw. Now, if we want to bring this up to kind of the weekly open, we can see it was like a 63% move. And we can see that currently where we are now, that's not too far away. Because if we zoom in on where we are now, we can see we've had this move up. We've had a move down, a first move down, which we've seen here, which you could argue is this low or this low. I'm putting it as this guy because we saw a bit of a tail off here, a bit of time doing nothing. I would probably equate those as similar price movements. If we're going to match them, overlay them, I would say these are equivalent, followed by where our purple line is, this first support that we've bounced from. And again, if we saw what happened last time, we had a bounce and then we came down even lower and put in a low. And most importantly, we came down to this sort of 600 Satoshi level. We're currently at 784 Satoshis. I think Cardano could definitely come down to a 600 Satoshi level. That is not far away at all. And considering we've had a rally here, we bounced off this level, which is a good sign, but we bounced off this level extremely strongly last time. And within a month, we were back below it, or just over a month. Within 2 months, we were below and putting in new lows. And again, Bitcoin continues to show strength throughout the crypto space. It's just the king at the moment. It has been for the last 2 years. And there have been altcoins that have done really well and some that have outperformed, but they are few and far between in the crypto space in general. So again, if you want to assume these are the same movements, which they are not, and say that we want to assume that the current cycle is at the same point here and it's going to play out the same, which it won't. Last time Cardano had a rally of 60% over 2 weeks. Now we are currently on the second week and we have not seen anything close to 60. Now I've seen nice moves, don't get me wrong, but we've seen a 10% move in half the time so far, which does not give me hope because last time we had a much stronger move at the start. Again, that's if you're comparing them week by week, which I think is foolish, but we're obviously not going to see the same move happen because it's either got to do a 50% move this week in a few days, which I think is unlikely, or it's just going to take longer to get there, or it doesn't get there at all. And again, Cardano broke up to this previous high that we set in, which if we want to assume like is this one over here, and would line up pretty well, is basically a 65% move to the upside to get to this high. So these would be more or less the same move, and you know, it could very well just take much longer to get there. It mightn't take too much longer at all, but if it is going to play out last time, it has to come back to this high, which is equivalent to this high. I think, to be honest with you, the better thing is to just have it capitulate now while it's at these lows. Put in that low, hopefully don't go much lower, and then have our rally. And then once we've hit these lows, we can finally start to justify an alt season being on the table. But if people are just saying, no, let it rally, they're forcing it up, they're buying Cardano, you're kind of, not only are you delaying the inevitable, but you're making it harder on yourself, in my opinion. Just ride it out, let it get to these lows, let it lose enough value against Bitcoin, let Bitcoin take enough market share so that it can then give it back in a huge tidal release into the altcoin space, and we can have our altcoin rally, like we've seen every other altcoin season. That's how it happens. Bitcoin gives up basically the dominance not too long after these altcoins put in their lows. Like we can see here, I mean, low was put in, immediately went up like, what, 10x at least. We put in a low here, basically pretty close to the all-time low, immediately go up 10x again, more even, I think it was like 50x here. Another interesting thing is you can sort of draw a line like this perhaps, where we can see that as time is going on, Cardano is putting in higher lows on the Bitcoin pair, which is bullish. So you could argue that this is one of the lows. You could argue, and I think it's more accurate to argue, that another low is coming. Whatever way you want to look at it, whether you think it's up only from here, whether you think we're going to see this dead cat bounce like we did last time, if you believe that these are playing out more or less the same way currently, you also believe that we will have a bull run pretty soon, and that Cardano will see great price action, which is what I'm hoping for. But honestly, I actually don't know right now. Again, it's just something we'll have to wait and see for. But I think that about wraps up this video, guys. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Comment down below what was wrong with it. Again, very sorry for being away for so long, but I should be back to regular uploads from now on. Thank you very much, guys. Take care and peace.